with Trevor Ombija.
Good evening. You're just in time for the Monday Report. Thank you so much for tuning in. And tonight we are live in our headquarters in Nairobi. We're still continuing with a series of Sauti ya Mwananchi where we ask the people, are they getting value for their money that is being collected by the government through taxes? That conversation coming up in just a bit, and later on we'll be having some people in the panel. My guest will be Mumo Musuva, the Commissioner, Nairobi Rivers Commission, will be here. Also Patrick Analo, the Chief Officer, Urban Development and Planning, will be joining us. Dr. Umo Luga, the PS for Medical Services, has just sent in his apologies. He's handling an emergency, so he will not be joining us tonight, but he will give us another session to speak about SHA. Tom Odero, Assistant Inspector General of Police, will be here to speak about matters security. And FCPA Hesbon Omolo, an economist, will be talking to us about the economy. Is it improving? Do the people feel the difference or not? Are citizens getting value for their taxes? Sauti ya Mwananchi continues here. This is the third episode of the Sauti ya Mwananchi. Next week we'll probably be heading to Kakamega. But I'd like to hear from you mostly at Trevor Ombija at Citizen TV Kenya. Use the hashtag Citizen Monday Report. That conversation coming up in just a bit. But for now, our top stories tonight. Right to vote. Marginalized communities getting on the voters' roll as IEBC launches enhanced continuous voter registration across the country.
This is a transfer of functions. So if you're funding, if you're coordinating, and if you're implementing, then you have already taken all the functions.
This is not a takeover. The NMS was a transfer of functions.
Senators fault Nairobi County Corporation deal with the national government as Mudavadi insists the agreement is not a transfer of functions.
Like someone on fire to like a gun like three times at once, man.
Revisiting the final moments of the late Rex Kanyike Masai as his best friend and colleague takes the stand at the inquest.
Kampuni inaitwa Convergence Network Solutions. Iko na 17.89%. Hiyo kampuni ni ya Waziri Aden Duale.
I have lived a life of integrity. Don't talk about Aden Duale owns this company. Before you talk about, I've challenged you tomorrow to bring the CR Tolo.
No let up. The war of words between Gachagua and Duale continues over allegations of corruption involving SHA. Thank you so much for tuning in. Our sign language interpreter tonight is Yulan Zale. So the enhanced continuous voter registration exercise began countrywide with the Independent Electoral and Boundaries Commission targeting to list 6.5 million new voters. The first phase of the exercise, which is expected to run until 28th of April 2026, began in all the wards across the 47 counties. IEBC Chairperson Erastus Ethekon is calling for stakeholder collaboration in mobilizing Kenyans to register as voters. Safin Achieng Ouma monitored day one of the exercise and filed the following report.
As she turned out to be counted among the newly registered voters in Shimoni, Kwale County on Monday, Saida Hamisi was more than elated. As a member of the Pemba community, which is one of the marginalized communities in Kenya, Hamisi says this was her chance to rewrite the history of her people and her country.
Sasa tuliteseka sana, ilikuweko sisi elimu kwetu ni shida. Hata hospitali huduma ilikuwa kina mama pia tunazalia nyumbani. Manake ilikuwa hatuna hata vile linda mama zile tu. Wengi sana walipotea tuseme.
Many residents from the region heeded the call to add their name to the voter register, terming this their only fighting chance.
Sasa hii natembea vizuri sana na nashukuru pahali popote nazungumza ile lugha ambayo niko nayo ya mama ile ya Kipemba.
Sasa hii nami nimejulikana sasa. Ilikuwa kwa mimi nimezibwa, yani kama ni kwenye boxi, lakini sasa hivi nimefunguliwa, sasa niko huru. Sasa naweza kutembea popote. Hata sisi Wapemba pia tuweze kujivunia. Maana ilikuwa tukiona wenzetu waenda kupiga kura, ilikuwa tuna choyo, lakini sasa hii tutachagua yule mgombea ambaye kwamba tunajua anafaa.
Speaking during the National Enhanced Continuous Voter Registration Exercise, Independent Electoral and Boundaries Commission Chairperson Erastus Ethekon noted that the Commission targets 6.5 million new voters and called for massive collaboration.
We call upon the county administration, all the political leaders, the civil society, education institutions, influencers, in social media and in many other places.
The exercise was also launched in several counties. In Nairobi County, IEBC officials pitched camp at the Central Business District to woo new voters to be part of this civic duty.
Continuous registration has been happening in our offices. We felt that more citizens could not access those services from the offices, so we are going down to the county assembly ward where we'll be closer.
At Anniversary Towers, the IEBC headquarters, young people turned out in their numbers, determined to push for change through the ballot.
We just want people to register for voting. We want young Kenyans to take part in the voting process. We want young Kenyans to wake up one day and say that because I have the voter's card, I want to register for voting. I want to vote now. And that can only happen if we, as the younger people, mobilize ourselves. We don't have to wait for anybody else to come.
And as the numbers of young registered voters increase progressively, the youth have been challenged to walk the talk come 2027.
Let them come up and grab these positions. I've served as the Deputy Speaker and now the Speaker of the County Assembly of Nairobi. I would love to see a Gen Z sitting in that seat in 2027.
In Nyamira County, the exercise began smoothly on day one, with IEBC officials targeting to reach all the eligible residents in all wards across the 4 constituencies.
Those who wish to transfer are encouraged to come to the constituency. They will find us, we will transfer them, but the kids in the different wards are open to register voters across the country.
The enhanced voter registration exercise, which started Monday, will run until 28 April 2026 at all IEBC offices, county commissioners' offices and selected centres in every ward across the country. Safin Achieng Oma, Citizen TV.
And away from that, DCP party leader Rigathi Gachagua has escalated his corruption claims over the alleged inefficiency of the Social Health Authority, that is SHA. In his latest allegations, the former deputy president claims that Health Cabinet Secretary Adan Duale partly owns a company implicated in a suspected 104 billion shilling SHA fraud. However, CS Duale has once again dismissed those claims, terming them wild allegations aimed at extorting money from entities providing services in the health sector. Setolale has more.
For the second consecutive day, former Deputy President Rigathi Gachagua and Health Cabinet Secretary Adan Duale traded sharp accusations over an alleged dossier on the Social Health Authority, SHAM. Speaking during the United Opposition tour of the Ukambani region, DCP party leader Rigathi Gachagua claimed that CS Duale holds a 17% stake in a company allegedly operating within a consortium contracted to run the SHA system at a cost of 104 billion shillings.
Katika ile consortium ambaye ililete biashara ya 104 billion. Kampuni inaitwa Convergence Network Solutions. Iko na 17.89%. Hiyo kampuni ni ya Waziri Adan Duale, ndio mwizi mkuu katika Jamhuri ya Kenya.
But Health Cabinet Secretary Adan Duale has strongly denied the claims.
I still wait for him tomorrow at 10 o'clock to go to the Business Registration Bureau, to go to Parliament, and get my from the Hansard. Even he doesn't need to go to Parliament. To go to Hansard and get my wealth declaration. I have lived a life of integrity. So I can account for a coin. I don't own any company that does business with government. Don't talk about Adan Duale owns this company. Before you talk about, I've challenged you tomorrow to bring the CR12. But let me challenge you. Please, I dare you, come to a press conference. Stop running around. You can run, but you can't hide.
CS Duale says a total of 27.5 billion shillings in claims has been paid out over the 19 months since the rollout of the Social Health Authority, accounting for 78% of all claims processed during the period. Duale further threatened to reveal the identities of individuals allegedly linked to the former deputy president and implicated in fraud within the now defunct National Hospital Insurance Fund, NHIF.
I want to tell Rigiji and all the other extortionists and the blackmailers and the fraudsters that I will not lose the focus to deliver to the people of Kenya a strong, resilient, affordable, accessible healthcare system.
The DCP leader further claims that the alleged fraud linked to the operationalization of the e-citizen platform has resulted in the irregular withdrawal of 6.3 billion shillings.
E-citizen, Kasongo owns 80%. Wameiba 6.3 billion.
Mugogadi. Wangapangapagogadi.
Seth Olale, Citizen TV.
At the same time, the control of budget is tonight painting a debt crisis where 61% of the country's external debt, amounting to 3.3 trillion shillings, is due for repayment within 1 year. Appearing before National Assembly Debt and Privatization Committee, Margaret Nyakango said that the pressure exerted by the high debt servicing obligations has been constraining fiscal space, limiting the government's ability to allocate adequate resources for development and social programs such as education and health. Stephen Leto has the details.
The Controller of Budget returned to Parliament to sound an alarm over the heightening country's vulnerability occasioned by pressure to meet debt servicing obligations on external loans whose repayment dates are soon falling due. Margaret Nyakango, who appeared before the National Assembly's Debt and Privatization Committee, warned that 61% of the country's external debts, amounting to 3.3 trillion shillings, which will be due within 1 year, exposes the country to rollover risk.
We find ourselves in a debt trap where we sign for loans when we are not ready because we continue paying these commitment fees and interest, so we get poorer and therefore cannot do more development programs.
Nyakango blames the National Executive for signing up to loans without planning. Nyakango flagged a loan that was signed up on behalf of Kenya Power to lay underground cables in the city of Nairobi, only for Kenya Power to report that they were not aware of such a loan.
We borrowed for Konza City, Konza Technopolis. You know that thing on Mombasa Road? The implementers were not ready. So we have been paying commitment fees throughout. We also paid for Kenya Power to do underground cabling in Nairobi. They were not even aware that there was such a loan.
Nyakango also told Parliament that the country's budget hole is deepening owing to bond interest call-up. Commitment fees paid to loans still at the hands of lenders, also drawing more questions.
There seems to be a vicious cycle of these commitment fees and interest. We pay commitment fees because we have not accessed money for which we have signed. So the fact that the lender is parking it for us is what we are paying for.
The Controller of Budget now wants Parliament to intervene before it gets out of hands. Stephen Leto, Citizen TV.
Now, members of the Senate Committee on Devolution and Intergovernmental Relations have faulted the cooperation agreement between the Nairobi County Government and the national government, saying that the national government illegally took over the functions of the county government. Prime Cabinet Secretary Musalia Mudavadi, however, dismissed the allegations, saying that the deal was above board and was aimed at allowing Nairobi to receive more funding due to its special status as the capital city and the seat of power. Emmanuel To has the details.
All for us to attend to your committee.
His appearance before the Senate Standing Committee on Devolution and Intergovernmental Relations was meant to clear the air on the legality and procedure of the signing of the cooperation deal between the Nairobi County Government and the national government, entered on the 17th of February this year. Members of the committee poked holes into the agreement, saying it was a clever way by the national government to take over the county functions, as it was done in 2020 in the Nairobi Metropolitan Services deal without the input of the Nairobi residents.
So the public participation process was not properly followed. It was being done post facto. It was being done after the signing of the agreement.
This cooperation has been done without the Senate approval, has also been done without clear transfer agreement safeguards, and also it lacks legal clarity.
This is a 2-year program. So what happens after 2 years? What's a long-term plan for this kind of intervention? Because we require this city has to be improved.
The members claiming that the due process of executing the deal was not followed and that the deal threatens to leave the governor of Nairobi County, Johnson Sakaja, and the MCAs with no clear roles.
This is a transfer of functions. So if you're funding, if you're coordinating, and if you're implementing, then you have already taken all the functions.
So if you're meeting and planning on these functions, what is the county cabinet doing? Is it also meeting and planning functions?
Prime Cabinet Secretary Musalia Mudavadi, who chairs the steering committee of the agreement, dismissed the claims, saying the 80 billion shilling deal was done in accordance with Article 89 of the Constitution of Kenya and Section 6(5) of the Urban Areas and Cities Act.
This is not a takeover. The NMS was a transfer of functions. This one is not a transfer of functions. It is purely around coordination.
Musalia adding that the roles are clearly defined and that the initiative is meant to give more money to the county.
Nairobi being the capital city, it is the image of the entire nation, and that is why it's captured under the Urban Areas and Cities Act as the capital city, and it will call sometimes for special interventions.
The 80 billion shilling addition of funding to the county through the deal will include the setting up of 50,000 lighting points in the city, last mile connectivity to the informal settlements, increasing water supply to 50,000 cubic litres, construction of 54-kilometre sewer line, and bettering the roads and drainage in the city. Emmanuel Toh, Citizen TV, Nairobi.
Away from that, the final moments of the late Rex Kanyike Masai were revisited in court on Monday as his best friend and colleague at Nairobi's Yaya Center took the stand in a high-profile inquest that has dragged on for nearly 2 years. George Ndikas recounted how an ordinary day quickly descended into chaos. He told the court that police officers, both in uniform and plain clothes, opened fire indiscriminately, firing live rounds in all directions. Ndikas testified that he had 3 gunshots, one of which struck Masai on the left thigh, a wound that proved to be fatal. Citizen TV's Ben Kirui has been following that story.
I swear by the Almighty God.
I swear by the Almighty God.
He is one of the key prosecution witnesses in the death inquest of Rex Kanyike Masai. George Ndikas recounting the harrowing final moments leading up to the fatal shooting during the June 2024 Finance Bill protest. George Ndikas, a friend and colleague of the deceased, took the stand and walked the court through the painful events of the evening of June 20th.
Akakuja akaniambia, bros, twende tao pia si to protest the finance bill.
Ndikas told the court that the day had started like any other. After leaving work, he went home and found Masai cleaning. Later, the two traveled from High-Rise to the city center, where they joined other young people gathered to protest against the finance bill.
Tulitembea tu kutoka home because tunatoka tu hapa High-Rise.
Mko mnatoka High-Rise. Mkatembea tu.
Tukatembea tu town.
He emphasized that they stayed away from the front lines of the demonstration. Instead, they remained at the back, observing the events as they unfolded. According to Ndikas, Masai was simply watching and occasionally recording videos on his phone and was not involved in any trouble.
Hata tukua hii street. Mara kwanza tulikuwa ile street ingine. Unaona kwa hii video sa ile street ingine huko. Huko ndo tulikuwa na protest. Egezi ilikuwa Parliament Road. From not from. Sasa huko ndo makarao sa walikuja wengi na walikuwa wanatupa matia gas nini wakitu disperse. Owisi tukatani hivi ndio tukakuja tukaanza kutembea na hii street, unaona. Which hata tulifanya tutan ni hizo gunshots zenye zilipigwa hii side, unaona. Juu kila mtu ilibidi amekimbia.
The situation quickly escalated when police moved in to disperse the crowd with the tear gas. Panic erupted as people scattered in all directions. Within moments, protesters and police were in a standoff, and then came the gunshots.
Tear gas zilikuwa zinafire at once. Tear gas utajua tu ikifanya, unaona. But at this moment nilisikia like someone amefire to like a gun like three times at once, unaona.
Ulisikia tu mlio za risasi
zikifuatana.
Ndika has paused during his testimony as he recalled his last exchange with Masai moments before the chaos intensified.
Okay, alinionyesha kwa mguu because alikuwa amevaa tu skinny jeans, unaona. Sasa hata by that time yani alikuwa ameloa damu.
2 witnesses testified on Monday, including Inspector Joseph Kagera, a crime scene management officer based at the regional police headquarters in Nairobi, who presented photographic evidence documenting Masai's condition after the shooting. The inquest is set to resume on Wednesday next week. Ben Kiroi, Citizen TV, Nairobi.
Now, families of victims of the protest are calling for an extension of the deadline to submit documents required for compensation to the Kenya National Commission on Human Rights. The families, accompanied by human rights activists, say that the current 60-day window is too short and could compromise the integrity of the process. And as Emily Chebet now reports, human rights defenders warn that the limited time frame could lead to a rushed exercise, potentially locking out many deserving victims and undermining the overall purpose of the compensation plan.
With just 3 days left before the deadline for families and victims of the protest to submit documents for compensation, several affected families say they are yet to complete the process. They cite poor communication and a lack of clear arrangements on how to engage the Kenya National Commission on Human Rights. A meeting that had been scheduled for this Monday morning to address their concerns was cancelled at the last minute, leaving the victims frustrated and with more questions than answers.
Wazazi walikuwa wamejitolea, kuna wenye walikuja, wenye wametoka Kisumu, kuna wenye wametoka mbali, wamefika hadi Nairobi. Tunaingia mali tulikuwa tunafaa kukutana, tunapata pia kuna maskari kadhaa hapo wenye sijui walikuwa wanafanya nini. So sisi hatuna vita na serikali. Sisi tunataka tu haki.
Kitu ya kwanza, ofisi ni moja Nairobi. Kuna wale waliuliwa Mombasa, Kisumu, Kakamega. Unapatiwa mzazi ana hata fare ya kufika hapa Nairobi.
The victims are now calling for an extension of the 60-day period to allow them adequate time to file the required documents, even as they raise concerns about how the compensation process will be conducted.
Wangu ni missing. So ukipeleka makaratasi pale, wanakuuliza uliripoti niko na ubi na huna dokumenti ingine. Wanasema wanataka wale waliuliwa ama wale walishutiwa, na huyo mwenye alimiss na alikuwa kwa that scene yake itaendaje.
Tunataka kujua wana compensate kuanzia mwaka gani mpaka mwaka gani. Hiyo ndio ombi letu sisi kama wazazi, kama familia, kama jamaa ya wale wenye waliuawa, na kuna amputees pia.
Human rights activists are urging the commission to conduct the process with full transparency and free from any form of political interference.
We know politicians are trying to cool temperatures before June 25th, so they want this process done and sorted out before June 25th. But our point is that this has to be done meticulously, it has to be done carefully, failure to which we will go round in circles and we'll have people still complaining about the same thing.
The activists are also urging the government to increase the compensation fund, currently set at 2 billion Kenya shillings, saying the amount is insufficient to adequately compensate victims across the country. At the same time, they are calling for the compensation process to prioritize victims of the recent Gen Z-led protest before addressing older cases, arguing that the wounds are still fresh and many families are yet to rebuild their lives. Emily Chebet, Citizen TV, Nairobi.
The government has outlined a series of interventions to cushion Kenyans from supply chain disruptions arising from the ongoing conflict in the Middle East, with President William Ruto assuring the country of stability in key sectors. Our reporter Dennis Otieno has the details.
The government says it is closely monitoring the situation in the Middle East and its potential impact on Kenya's economy, particularly on fuel, food supply and exports. President William Ruto has assured Kenyans that measures already in place will help stabilize the economy and protect households from global shocks. In a statement, the president said the government-to-government fuel import arrangement continues to cushion the country from volatility in global oil prices and ensure steady supply in the local market. President Ruto says the Ministry of Energy, working alongside the National Treasury, is reviewing global price movements to guide further interventions if necessary. On food security, the government says there are adequate fertilizer stocks to support farmers through the current planting season, reducing the risk of production disruptions, even though farmers have reported missing out on fertilizer. In the export sector, Kenya is also diversifying its markets to sustain earnings, with tea exports showing resilience at the auction despite global uncertainties. Meat export has been affected due to freight disruptions, and the government says alternative solutions are being explored. Meanwhile, the government is leveraging efficiency at the ports of Mombasa and Lamu to maintain the flow of goods, even as it engages international partners to unlock new logistics opportunities. Dennis Otieno, Citizen TV.
All right, on that note, we're taking a quick break here in the Monday Report, but you can see on the other side, we're getting ready for the town hall session. Are citizens getting value for their taxes? That's a conversation we're having. We're speaking about matters housing, matters economy, matters health, and everything else in between there. We have more than 150 people in that audience because they're the ones who are going to give the priority. We're calling this Sauti ya Mwananchi. Later on also, Mumo Musuva will be there. He's a commissioner from the Nairobi Rivers Commission. Patrick Analo, the Chief Officer, Urban Development Planning, will also be there. Tom Odero, Assistant Inspector General of Police, and FCPS Bonomolo will be speaking to us. He's an economist, will be speaking to us in terms of the economy. Are citizens getting value for their money? Keep your views coming at Trevor Mbija at Citizen TV Kenya. Use the hashtag Citizen Monday Report. That coming up in just a bit, so don't go too far. Through the eyes of experts, a city whose very name means a place of cool waters is now seeing those waters threaten its very existence. Legal advisor Paul Mwangi and his spokesperson Dennis Onyango told Citizen TV that Raila may not have run for president in 2027. Emmanuel Teo spoke to the two of them and prepared the following report.
So much, Wakili, for your time. In an interview with Citizen TV, the late ODM party leader Raila Odinga's lawyer Paul Mwangi and the former premier spokesperson Dennis Onyango revealed how the late Raila Odinga kept two cards, a militant and a diplomatic one, during his illustrious decades in politics. Mwangi disclosing that the militant team in the camp, led by ODM Secretary General Edwin Sifuna, was in fact Odinga's fallback plan should he have run into headwinds with a broad-based political arrangement with President William Ruto.
Raila will not go into anything without an exit strategy. So even when he began working with President Ruto, he had an exit strategy.
What was the exit strategy?
The exit strategy was the people who were fighting it.
Sifuna's side?
Yes, that was his exit strategy. He needed his exit strategy alive and strong before he goes for negotiation, because that's the only way he can. And I think he was going for 50% of the government then.
50%?
Yes, I think that's what it was. But he needed to be very strong.
Sentiments which were also echoed by Dennis Onyango, who served as the former premier spokesperson.
So yes, Sifuna, Orengo were part of Raila's exit strategy. Babu was not part of it. He never had Babu anywhere in his thinking. He thought he was going to be at trouble.
The two revealing that the factions always operated under often opposite but firm instructions to keep Odinga's options open.
I think the problem that we have today is that he passed away before he called people to order. Because when we went and finally did a handshake, The military side never really joined us because the thinking of the two sides are totally different.
So you will go on, you will tell you oppose President Ruto, this thing is not working, or this thing may not work, we can't work with him. But when he buys into that agenda, he will not come back and tell you that I have sat down with that guy I told you to go and deal with, and I think he is up to something, we are ready to work with him. He will not tell you. So it is up to you to read the signs.
The leaders who also waded into the recent split in the ODM party, saying there was no way to salvage the situation.
I think the two sides must split. As I told you, one is a militant wing, the other one is a political wing. They operate under two very, very different assumptions. They were all operating under two very different job descriptions. They will never agree.
There will be a dominant wing led by Uburu, and there will be a fringe wing out there.
Mwangi and Onyango, however, differed on whether or not the former premier had made a decision on whether to launch his sixth stab at the presidency in 2027.
He was leaving options open. He thought that if this guy pulls this through, there would be reason to support him, to run, stand with him. But in the event that he doesn't, he was leaving that option open that we could present a candidate, and that candidate would have been himself.
Over time, after the last election, he behaved in a way that suggested he would not run again. By this time, in every of his political whatever, he became quite rebellious and started pumping up. This is the time he started, we can say, pumping up the jam. He never did that throughout from 2022-23.
Emmanuel Toh, Citizen TV, Nairobi.
Nairobi has in the recent months been hit by repeated deadly floods, leaving behind a trail of destruction and loss of lives. The city, built on wetlands, had nature's own sponge designed to absorb water, not to fight it. But today, those natural defenses are disappearing, and the water is drowning the city under the sun. Tonight, our reporter Emily Chebet tells a story of a city whose very name means place of cool waters, but has over the years seen the same cool waters threaten its very existence.
These scenes have become synonymous with the capital, Nairobi. Streets turned into rivers, cars swallowed whole, lives brought to a standstill. Each time it rains, the city braces, and too often it floods. What was once seasonal is now frequent. What was once manageable is now deadly. The recent floods claiming close to 40 lives.
You see what...
This is present-day Nairobi, a city whose name comes from Masai phrase Enkare Nairobi, meaning place of cool waters. Built on a network of rivers and tributaries flowing from the highlands of Ngong and Kikuyu, these waterways feed into major river systems, including Athi, Galana, Sabaki, which drains into the Indian Ocean.
You will find a natural flow of rivers, as I said, from the highlands all the way through the CBD, which is expected here.
History shows that the area now occupied by Nairobi city was once largely an inhabitable swamp. That changed in 1899 when the British established a supply depot for Uganda Railway, linking Mombasa to Uganda. The location was carefully chosen for its central position along the railway line and its network of rivers that provided reliable water supply and its elevation, which offered a cool climate settlement. According to the experts, the wetland nature of Nairobi is supposed to soak 80% of rainwater and allow only 20% as runoff. But the reality has changed.
A lot of the places, uplands in Kiambu, Limuru areas, Kikuyu, were under agriculture, rural areas, and they allowed a lot of infiltration. Over the years, we have settled, we have built up all those areas.
Areas that were naturally sinks of water are now reclaimed areas like marshes. You know, you find people building in marshes nowadays. There is even technology for building that. So ideally, people will continue having those kind of habits.
The city's physical planning is now under scrutiny. Politics and corruption have been cited as key drivers of development, encroaching on waterways and riparian land.
I have observed like the small streams that were there in the maps. People have cut the plots right across. Nobody cares about that small stream, that it was supposed to be a natural waterway, but not a plot. If you go to Westlands, I think you still see that. There are some places in Westlands where there's a small rivers, and you see infrastructure, schools.
About 90% is our own making. 10% could be natural, because even when the development is there, we find that this was still happening. Somebody can just go with a storm or something like that. But of the recent times, most of the failures we are having in this city is lack of planning. Simple.
These GIS images of Mukuru area of Nairobi depicts a clear picture.
If we continue as a population to change the earth system, then definitely we anticipate that the earth will fight back.
If we continue with whatever is happening now, humanity is going to perish within a very short time. I don't think we can go with this kind of nonsense for more than 50 years now. So we have to sit back and we have to say, no, enough is enough.
For 23 years, Professor Gadhenya has kept a daily record of rainfall from his home. His findings, officially verified by the Kenya Meteorological Department, show clear shifts in rainfall patterns and intensity. But he says, with proper planning, the worst can still be avoided. According to the experts, water harvesting could reduce runoff within the city, but surfaces like these are doing the opposite. They don't absorb water, but instead it is forcing it to run straight to drains that are already overwhelmed. They are calling for collective responsibility to safeguard the city's future for generations to come. Emily Chebet, Citizen TV, Nairobi.
Family Bank makes 5.4 billion shillings profit in first year of new 5-year strategic plan. Business news, and the Family Bank Group has posted a profit after tax of 5.4 billion shillings for the financial year ended 2025. This represents a 55.4% increase from the 3.5 billion reported in 2024. According to the lender, the growth in performance was primarily driven by growth in interest-earning assets and improved income generation, supported by a strengthened balance sheet. Jimmy Mbogo has more on the lender's full-year financial performance.
In the year under review, the lender saw its total assets grow by 24% to 208.7 billion shillings, up from an asset base of 168.5 billion shillings recorded in 2024. This comes from an increase in customer deposits, which rose from 126.5 billion shillings in 2024 to 151.9 billion shillings in 2025, a 20% jump that allowed the bank to disburse 105.9 billion shillings in loans to their customers, up from 92.9 billion shillings disbursed in 2024. MSMEs and the retail sector accounted for the majority of the lender's loan portfolio at 60%, while corporate accounted for 40%.
Our profit before tax last year recorded a whole 62% growth to 6.3 billion for the group. Our profit after tax recorded a 55% growth to 5.37 billion. Shareholders, investors, our dear customers, everybody here, this is a good and a strong performance.
In 2025, the bank's net interest income rose by 46.1% to 15.63 billion shillings, while non-interest income increased by 4.6% to 4.56 billion shillings. With interest rates declining, the bank is set to reallocate its capital from government paper in reverse to its 2025 decision, where the lender invested 74 billion shillings, marking a 45% increase in investment in government paper, arguing that private sector lending still remains the ultimate goal.
This is very deliberate and very strategic, because when we have funds and we have excess, or we have cash or we have funds, we have to deploy them temporarily to a place where we can earn interest. So for us to be in government securities is as we await to understand the loan process, the length of the loan process. So we are very keen in divesting that money from the government securities towards lending.
And as the bank releases the 2025 numbers, it says its intention is to list at the NSE by May this year, subject to regulatory approvals. However, the details of the listing, particularly how much equity will be floated in the market, is yet to come, with the management leading that this will be determined by which markets they intend to get into and the capex required. Jimmy Mbogo, Citizen TV, Nairobi.
So high logistics costs are locking small businesses out of African markets despite expanded trade opportunities under the African Continental Free Trade Area. A new study by the Kenya Association of Manufacturers shows that small and medium enterprises are bearing the brunt of expensive and unpredictable logistics, limiting their ability to compete across the continent. The report reveals that transport costs along key corridors remain high, with shipping a 20-foot container from Nairobi to Lusaka costing up to $7,000 and taking as long as 30 days. Kenya Association of Manufacturers is now calling for urgent reforms to cut logistic costs and unlock intra-African trade.
To move our goods from one part of Africa to another part of Africa, it becomes so difficult. In fact, we are still, in terms of some areas of logistics, I would say we are still colonized. Africa needs to wake up. And it's our opportunity right now to wake up and say, how do we do trade amongst us?
The country's petroleum sector is rebounding, with fuel consumption surging by over 10% in 2025, according to the latest industry data. The growth driven by transport, logistics and industrial activity points to a sector regaining momentum after a period of slowdown. However, even as demand picks up, questions are emerging over whether this momentum can be sustained, with rising geopolitical tensions in the Middle East threatening global oil supply and pricing. Here now is Yasmin Wamboi with the details of that report.
But not only keeping...
Data from the Petroleum Institute of East Africa shows the country's oil sector rebounded in 2025, with total fuel consumption rising by 10.7% to about 6.5 billion litres. At the heart of this recovery is transport and logistics, with petrol consumption rising by 11% and diesel by 9%. This jump in transport fuels was driven by lower pump prices, increased vehicle uptake and improved business activity. At the same time, industrial demand accelerated, with fuel oil consumption surging by more than 65%, pointing to increased activity in manufacturing and power generation. Even so, the recovery was not uniform. Jet fuel demand declined by about 4%, indicating continued weakness in the aviation sector. On the other hand, LPG recorded sustained double-digit growth.
The LPG will become a reality to most of the households in Kenya and avert all the health problems that we continue to face in use of other fossil fuel, firewood, charcoal, etc.
On the consumption side, retail outlets like fueling stations still account for over half of total fuel consumption, but their dominance is slowly declining as resellers and bulk users gain ground. This is a show of stronger demand from commercial and industrial players. Vivo Energy continues to lead the market with a 14.7% share, followed by Rubis Energy and Total Energies. Retail footprint remains a key driver of market share.
We've had a big problem on the demand or supply side, where there's insufficient products and insufficient stocks to meet the demand side. So I'm encouraging actors in your industry, the oil independents. We are talking to people like Jack here and many others with a view to encouraging them to list so we can continue to democratize wealth.
But just as the sector began to stabilize, a wave of uncertainty is building. Escalating tensions in the Middle East are threatening to disrupt global oil supply and drive prices higher, raising concerns that the gains seen so far could be short-lived. Jasmine Wamboi, Citizen TV.